but it was very refreshing. I'm like, okay, wow, how did we get from A to B here? I was playing my game, and now we're deep diving into the Bible, searching through scriptures, defending what I believe, trying to articulate what I believe. There is a time where God is talking to Satan, and the Satan in this book is referred to as the accuser, right? It's like a courtroom. And Satan is talking to God, and he's saying, God, people don't love you just to love you. They love you for what they get, for the things, for the blessings. And God asks the accuser, we'll call him Satan. God asks Satan, what have you been up to? It's almost like I know, but I'm going to ask you anyway, trying to prove a point to you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. You are listening to the Convert Me podcast. My name is Scott Despinda, and today we got a great show for you. We are going to be talking about the book of Job. And before we get into that, I want to talk about a few things that has been on my mind, some things that I think would be really interesting to talk about. A few things was my church experience, so we'll get into that. Secondly, I want to share a story about this conversation that I had with a person that I met over a video game online about Judaism. And it was a great conversation, and it came out of nowhere. And this is how the Spirit works. This is how God works. I'm over here. I like to unwind. Relax, and I put on a video game, and I'm playing my video game. I'm in this public game, and this person enters my game, and we start chatting. What areas have we finished? What is there left to do? Stuff like that. And all of a sudden, he asked me if I'm religious, and I said, "Yeah, sure." Yeah. I wasn't too sure where that was going, so I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And he just, he kept on inquiring, denomination, what do I believe in, what church and stuff like that. And I answered, and he mentioned that he used to be a Christian too. I told him, yeah, I'm a Christianity. He said, well, yeah, I used to be Christian too. I recently converted to Judaism. And I told him, oh, okay, that's interesting. I don't know too much about it. And so I was asking him about it. And it sounds a lot like, the Jewish religion. Again, I'm not too familiar with either of them. But from what I gathered is that they don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and that he wasn't the king and all of this. And so we get to talking. It's a really respectful conversation, and I'm not trying to make him feel any kind of way. I'm not trying to convert him like I typically am. He obviously has something going. And so I hear him out, and he asks me questions. And at this point, it feels like he is trying to understand, or it actually felt like he was trying to test me if I actually understood what I believed in. I feel like he was going to try to give me aha, see, this is why I think this, and that is why I converted to Judaism. And, that got me a little nervous. I've never had to defend my faith before. I'm a recent convert. I got baptized about 2 years ago. I haven't even gone through the entire Bible front and back. You're doing it with me. We're in the book of Job. This is as far as I've gotten. And I tell him that, yeah, this is as far as I've gotten. I recently got baptized, and so he's trying to make his case, and he brings out Deuteronomy. Oh boy, I wish I had it, but it was a verse about rejecting false prophets and how false prophets would come. And, again, really respectful. I didn't even say, actually, this could combat that. I didn't say none of that. Just, yeah, okay, that's cool. And that's when he started, kind of obviously trying to get me to defend it. And I feel like he was just genuinely curious, because he said, I'm willing to hear you out. So I said, okay. I bring out my Bible, which is always on my desk. And so first thing that came to mind, and he's like, okay, why do you think that Jesus is the Messiah? And I bring out my Bible. First thing that came to mind was the Davidic covenant. The covenant that says that God made with David, saying that his house would forever be a part of that lineage. And so, again, I don't know the scriptures too well, so I'm flipping through this Bible. The game is completely on hold. We're just stand still. Everything has just changed. There's not what I was expecting, right? But it was very refreshing. I'm like, okay, wow, how did we get from A to B here? I was playing my game, and now we're deep diving into the Bible, searching through scriptures, defending, what I believe, trying to articulate what I believe. And so, okay, yes, okay, I get what you're saying. You think that Jesus is not the Messiah. You think he's a false prophet, and he does all of this because of Deuteronomy, and you don't know why that Jesus was said to be the Messiah and all of that. And so, okay, you know what? And he asked me why I believe that. I'm like, well, first, why I believe he's not a false prophet. And I said, well, first, like I said, the Davidic covenant. And he said that he was going to bring out his Bible. And so he read it, and he's like, okay, well, he asked me another question, and he's probing. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's genuinely searching, or, again, just testing. So I also bring out Solomon. Solomon, his wife, that led him to stray when he started building idols and all of that. And he's like, okay, well, how would you describe a false prophet or something along that line? And man, I can't even articulate it to you, but I was just boom, exhibit A, exhibit B, exhibit C. And I'm just like, I was like, wow, all of this knowledge was just coming out right then and there. And it was a great experience. And he did not probe any further after that. It's like, yeah, he's the king, the promised king. And this is why I believe that in the Bible. And like I said, I brought out the Solomon, I brought out David, and just things that I've read so far. I'm only up to Job. And he said, okay, yeah. And then at this point, I had to leave. Game time was over. And, it was great. It was interesting. It was a respectful conversation. I got an opportunity to stretch my legs, open her up a little bit and kind of give it the gas, kind of see what I've learned so far. And I've never done that before. So that was super cool. And another experience that I had that I completely used everything that I learned in the Bible so far was talking to a coworker. And again, we talked about King David and his quarrel or his issue was how imperfect David was and how come God anointed him so highly. Why was he looked at so highly when really he was so imperfect? He was at fault for so much. And I completely understand what he was saying, where he was going, what he was getting at. And again, we're really respectful, but in my head, all these things came up. This is the reason. That's the reason. This is the reason. And so we got to talking, and then I mentioned to him, you got to remember that back then they didn't have the Bible. I've mentioned this in the podcast, right? They didn't have the Bible. Things weren't so readily available. Good versus evil was not so black and white as it is today. How do we know it's good? How do we know it's evil? We only know what we know. And back then, they only knew what they knew. So that was one case that I made that, nobody's perfect. What's good? What's evil? Second case, which I think was the nail in the coffin, was that the reason that God favored David, even though he was not perfect or too great at all. We're thinking, oh man, David was supposed to be the good king. And he was, but he was not the promised Messiah. He was not the king that we were waiting for. And that would be Jesus Christ. And I told my coworker that you got to remember that what God said was that he told Samuel to tell the people exactly what would happen if they got a king. And I told my coworker that Samuel warned them. The Israelites wanted a different king other than God. And God granted their wish, but Samuel warned them. This is all the stuff that will happen if you decide to go this path and ask for a king. And what Samuel warned, his prophecy came true. They were terrible kings. And everything that he warned them happened. Same to go with David. As much as we want to like him, as much as we do like him, all of his flaws, everything, he was not the promised king. And so I just really want to get out how useful the Bible is and how important it is to study. And more importantly, I want to talk about church and what it means. We think we just go there and it's some sort of activity, and it can be, but really it is teaching us how to brace for life's twists and turns. And there are a lot of twists and turns in life. And if we use that opportunity in church to study, to listen to the sermon or the lesson that is being taught, just like my conversations with these people about my faith and religion and about why God does what he does, all falls into place. Everything in it. And it starts with the Bible. No, it starts with your willingness. It starts with a broken heart and a contrite spirit, because that is how you come to God. That is how you enter the kingdom of God. I know, it sounds crazy, right? And another story, quick story, and it just happened, and I'm a little bummed, right? At first, I kind of took it a little personal, I'm going to say. I was like, no, wait a minute. Old me would have taken it personal, but like I said, going to church, studying the Bible, it teaches us how to react, how to brace for life's turns, how to handle ourselves, how to know that we aren't in control and everything happens for a reason. And what happened was a baptism. We had a new, curious person who's been coming to church. Our missionaries have been talking to him. And whenever this happens, it's such a great time, right? And it's very exciting. And we were actually called to meet with him before all this. we went back and forth with text messages, and we thought that it was we had a pretty good relationship, and we do. But the reason I'm telling you this is because that curious member decided to get baptized, which is great. I'm so happy, and this is so exciting. But at the time, I felt, wait a minute, I wasn't invited. How and when did this happen? What just happened? Right? You could see how someone would take it personal. And I'm like, what? Was there no announcement? How did I not hear about this? And I didn't, like I said, I was too happy about it to be angry or worry about anything petty, but it did show up. That thought did cross my mind, but all that, that voice in my head, remember your training. You remember what you've learned. This isn't about you. This isn't your plan. This is God's plan. And I let it go as soon as it came in. It went one ear out the other, and I just took it as it was, took the situation, and just became happy. Later that day, I checked my email, and apparently there was an email that went out. And apparently they mentioned it in some service, but I don't recall that. Anyway, beside the point. Super happy, just bummed I was not there. And it wasn't anyone's fault but my own. But like I said, things happen for a reason. It wasn't my plan. It wasn't meant to be, I guess. So great things happen, a lot of exciting things. And it really impressed me or shocked me how well I was able to handle that. And everything happens. A lot going on around us, more than what's in front of us or what we think. So much. And sometimes our suffering or other people's sufferings are around us, and we just have to take it little by little, just as life. Because life can be a whirlwind. Which brings me to our next lesson. We are going to get into the book of Job. And in the book of Job, there are a lot of great lessons. What do I want to talk about in the book of Job? What do I think about the book of Job? What do I want to tell you? How can I explain this book? Are questions that I'm asking myself, and oh my goodness, I'm gonna need a lot more time, or you are gonna need a lot more time than what we're gonna do here in this podcast. And I hope that you dedicate some of that time to look into that, because there are a lot of lessons to be learned here. I'll go over some. First, that suffering isn't necessarily a punishment. And Job is going to learn that in this book. So once again, thank you for joining us on this podcast. And I want to let you know that this book is so great. It is so good. And it's rough. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to give you fair warning. It is rough. There are hard lessons. And things happen. And I think you're going to see what I mean. I was talking with a coworker, and this was a long time ago, and I remembered that he said that he relates to the book of Job the most out of the Bible. And he had his reservations on this. He had his concerns. He had his questions. Yes, as we all do. And I didn't know the book at the time. And I thought the book of Job was something completely different. Like we know, even though we haven't read the Bible, we know the stories, right? We know about Moses. We know about the flood. We know about the parting the waters. We know about, what is that Disney movie? Prince of Egypt. And there's that other one. And we know these stories and Adam and Eve without even reading the Bible, and this was one of the ones that I thought I knew. I thought it was about a guy who was tested by God by being dealt a hard hand in life, which it is. I just thought the situations were different. So reading the book really opened my eyes to what it really was, and I'm glad that I went into it, because there is a lot to be learned, like I said. So Job, in the beginning, was a man of great wealth, probably power too, right? I'm not sure if it says anything about power, because he was a godly man. He was a very faithful and loyal family man. He had 10 children. He was extremely wealthy. He feared God. In Job 1, he's described as blameless and upright, which is just saying he's godly. He's faithful. And God loves Job. Job loves God. And the way that I found best to understand and break this book down is by looking at it as a courtroom. And court is in session. Who is on the stands? Well, that's good versus evil, which always is, right? It seems that way. It is always good versus evil. In this case, Satan and God. And it's an interesting contrast. We just left the book of Esther, which had nothing to do with God, but at the same time, everything to do with God, right? Not his name wasn't mentioned once, but his hand was in every single thing that happened in that book. Great book. Anyway, this book, the book of Job, is around God, and he's everywhere, just as he is every day, every time, always. But in this courtroom, we're going to say Satan is present, as he always is, but this time more prevalent. He's more active, and he is hungry for souls. He wants to be proven right. And God is saying, well, hang on, that's not exactly how this works. And it's interesting to think when going through this book that some people think it's wrong that God is dealing with Satan, that God is making these deals with Satan because he's the Almighty. Why is he doing this? And we can get into all of these things that people dissect the book and pick it apart and criticize it. But I just wanted to get into this one because we know that God is all powerful. We know that God can do whatever he wants, and we know that everything is a part of his plan. I just want to bring that part out just so you keep that in your mind, so you're not thinking, oh, what's going on? Is he making a deal? Is he not in control? Keep that thought in mind, that he is in control. This is a part of his plan as we go on in the book. All right, because interesting enough, okay, we know Job, he's rich, he's got all of these friends and family, he's got livestock. And there is a time where God is talking to Satan. And the Satan in this book is referred to as the accuser, right? It's like a courtroom. And Satan is talking to God, and he's saying, God, people don't love you just to love you. They love you for what they get, for the things, for the blessings. And God asks the accuser, we'll call him Satan. God asks Satan, what have you been up to? It's almost like I know, but I'm going to ask you anyway, trying to prove a point to you. And Satan says, I've been here, I've been there, I've been roaming around the earth. And right then and there, I thought, okay, that is a huge telling point. Satan isn't in hell. The devil is not in hell yet. He is roaming the earth, just as it says in the book of Job. He's been roaming here, roaming there. And next, God asks Satan, have you considered my faithful servant Job? Now, at first glance, it can be interpreted like he's volunteering Job. But if we take a step back and read what we had just read, that he's been roaming the earth. He's already been roaming the earth. And God has his plan. This is part of his plan. He knows everything. He's all powerful. And he's asking Satan if he's been considering Job about his thoughts that they don't love God just to love God, but for their blessings and riches and stuff like that. And the translation can be taken different ways. In this way, I like to look at it like God is telling Satan that he already knows, like, I see that you've been looking at my servant Job, instead of, have you considered, kind of like volunteering, hey, how about this one? No, don't go to that one. No, that one might make me look a little silly. But Job, he's a good guy. Test him. It might sound like that, but actually the actual translation would be that he knew that Satan already had his eye on Job. And why? Why did he have his eye on Job? Because all the things that we talked about, he's extremely wealthy. He fears God. He's blameless and upright. He's a family man. He prays and makes sacrifices for his family. Check this out. In Job chapter 1, verses 4 through 5, it says that his children went partying. They're all drinking wine and all of this. And Job is such a God-fearing family man that he makes sacrifices to God on their behalf. He's like, oh, just in case, right? Just in case, I am gonna already ask for forgiveness and make sacrifices for their sins, just in case they're out there sinning when they're at their party. And he does this regularly. He makes sacrifices for them, and while just to keep them safe. And that is the person that Job is. And I believe that is why Satan had his eyes on Job, and God is saying, well, I noticed that you've been watching my faithful servant Job. And this is the part where Satan tells God, yeah, I have been. And guess what? Job only loves you because he's very wealthy, and because he has a big family, and because he has a lot of friends, and this and that. And, well, what happens next? God says, you're wrong. That is not why Job loves me, because he loves me. And that's that. Simple as that. So simple. And, well, Satan is going to try to plead his case. And God says, well, you can try to plead your case, but just don't kill my faithful servant Job. That was the only rule. And so God and Satan are having their day in court, and there will be others in this book with their day in court. And we get into the book where Job loses everything. His livestock, his servants, his children, and it all hits like a truck. Everything happens at once. And it's like, okay, a messenger comes in and he says, oh, hey, your livestock, something happened, it's all gone. And right after that, oh, another servant comes in, oh, hey, your wealth, something has happened, it's all gone. And then the next servant, exactly right after, the next servant couldn't even catch his breath before the next servant was running in with more bad news. It says, oh, hey, Job, terrible news, your family, the house burnt down, or the house fell over and it killed everybody. And he, well, how do you think that he handled all of this? How do you think that he feels? And I think you'd be surprised. Of course he's grievous. Of course he is sad. But what does he do? He doesn't curse God. He blesses God. He says that God giveth, God taketh. Blessed be his name. Bless God. And that is who Job is. And you can imagine Satan is like, oh, nuts. I didn't get him that time, but guess what? God, the only reason I didn't get him this time is because, flesh for flesh, I think is the term that he used, which basically he said, Okay, yeah, these things happened to his things, but they didn't happen to him physically. So Satan's next test was pretty brutal. He took his health. He gave him some disease, nobody knows what it is. Some people think it was some mix between smallpox, leprosy, whatever it was really bad. So bad that nobody could even recognize him. I believe it was described as maggots coming out of sores from his body. And it was terrible. Really bad. And at this point, Job still does not curse God. Instead, he curses the day he was born. He's like, oh no, I understand that God is God and I still love him and he's blessed, but I just wish all of this bad stuff happening to me. I just want it to be done. I am done. I mean, how many times have we felt like that in our lives? We feel like the world is crumbling around us. Nothing is going right. Of course, it's not as extreme as what's happening with Job here, but we know the feeling of nothing going right and just wishing it'd be done with. And Job is going through this times 10 to the extreme. And I can't help but feel a little bit of a mirroring of Jesus, right? All the suffering that he goes through, and we look at that and we're like, oh boy, you know what? We can have the strength to go through this. Anyway, I just want to, side note, a little tangent. Anyway, back to the book of Job. It's a great story. So what happens now? Everything Job had is now gone. And Job he's not maintaining an everything is wonderful kind of attitude. He's not cursing God. He's devastated. But he just wish he'd never been born. He wants to be done with his life anyway. And you know what? It's a good example. We can be angry. We can be confused. We can grieve, but still have faith and still love God and still bless his name, just as Job. Because Job still has 3 friends. Well, I guess you be the judge of that, because with friends like these, who needs enemies, right? Job has 3 friends that enter the story. I believe their names are Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And it says that they come to comfort him. People say, they sat there with him for 7 days, being his friend. Me, personally, I'm not so sure, right? We can interpret this. That's what's great about the Bible. We're not reading the Bible. The Bible is reading us. And it's like, maybe they were just waiting for their opportunity and gathering their thoughts like sharks circling the water or a predator circling its prey. That's how I feel. That's how I see these 3 friends. Yeah, people say, in the beginning, they were good friends. They sat with him in silence for 7 days and 7 nights. That's the best thing to do. It is. That's the best thing to do, right? We grieve with those who mourn with those who mourn. But it doesn't stop there. After that, the friends open their mouths and they start talking, and that is when everything gets thrown everywhere. Everything is going crazy, and it is not helping Job one bit. And this is where the courtroom comes into play, because right now Job is on trial. Right now Job is taking the stand, and once again we're talking about good versus evil. Remember, Job was a great figure. A lot of money, a lot of friends, lots of property, family, everything. He had everything. And do you think that his friends were happy about that? I can look back on my life and I can use the example that I have received in my life, and I can say no. His friends were waiting for his demise. His friends were waiting for something that they can kick him down in the dirt on. His friends were waiting to spit in that guy's face. That's how I feel. And that was their opportunity. I think they were enjoying their 7 days and 7 nights looking at this guy like, well, the mighty have fallen. and they are taking their time coming up with their case because court is in session and Job is on the stand, and they are going to let everything that's on their mind go at Job, and he's going to get a dose of what they really think. And what is the premise of their argument? Well, it's that Job is a sinner. Job did something wrong. That is why all of this is happening. And they are not giving him any mercy. And I'll tell you, I think it's like 30. The whole book is 40-something chapters. And I think it's like 30 chapters of this courtroom session of Job listening to his friends bash him about how terrible he is. And Job's like, no, that can't be right. He's like, yes. His friend's like, yes, it is right. Look at what's happening to you. This does not happen to the innocent, right? The belief is that if you sin, bad things will happen to you. If you're good, good things will happen to you. That is the belief that everyone it goes upon. But even today, I'm sure. I've been guilty of that. Definitely. For sure. And I'm sure it still goes on today with others. And it's what's happening here. It's like, Job, all that stuff you had, what did you do? You finally got caught up. Everything that you deserve is finally coming back to you. And Job doesn't try to defend against his friends. Instead, he saves his case for God. In Job 13:3, he's asking, why is God allowing this to happen to me? And he says, but I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to argue my case with God. So what's interesting here is even Job believes that you do good, you get good. You be bad, you get bad. Because he's asking, why is God allowing this to happen to me? He is learning a very hard lesson here. And his friends, bunny ear quotation marks, are letting him have it. Oh, I'm sure they are enjoying this. I'm sure it's very, very delicious for them. Digging into this high figure who is almighty and who I'm sure they were very jealous of. And here's the thing. We read this and we're thinking, they're sending a text message, or they stopped over at his house to sit in a private room and they're talking about this. No, this was at like the front gate. This, like I said, it's like a courtroom. Everybody's wondering what's going on. This is in front of a large group, and the case of good versus evil is in session, and everybody is watching this. They're verbally battering him in front of the whole town. And you can imagine, it's very humiliating. What a sight to be seen, right? This guy of great wealth and power has now fallen and has nothing. And I think we can all relate to that too. I mean, I sure can. We lost a lot in life, and we think, what did we do? And that is the rundown on this great book. And I hope that you decide to pick it up. And I'm sure you're wondering how it ends. The short of it is that Job gets restored, right? God enters the courtroom and he sets the record straight. He rebukes Job's friends. He tells Job, where were you when I created all these things? Why are you so sure about my ways? What makes you think that? And it really lets us know who is in charge, and that just because bad things happen, just because we suffer, it doesn't mean that we're terrible. It doesn't mean that we're bad. It doesn't mean that God's against us, because that was Job's thought. He's like, oh no, God is against me. I love him still, and I'm faithful, but he's against me, and I wish you can just end this already, whatever that may mean. And God had his day in court too, and he set the record straight. And Job is restored. He was still a faithful servant. In Job chapter 42 verse 10, it says, "And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job." You know why? Because it was his. It was his already, his birthright. It was his destiny. It was his. Not to, right? But this is another thing that people dissect and talk about. Like, oh, wait a minute, Satan was right. He did good, so he was rewarded. No, he already had those things. He was already, you know, he had those things. He already had a great fortune, and it gets restored. Everything goes back to normal. And that is the power that we see. And, you know, Job receives his livestock back. He gets more servants. He gets 7 additional sons and 3 additional daughters, and a long life. In Job chapter 42, verse 16, it says, "Job lives another 140 years after his restoration." And the book ends with Job chapter 42, verse 17, and it says, "I'm an old man and full of days." I'm going to tell you, that is my dream. Just full of days. Old. 140 years, you know, at least. That'd be great. Anyway, that might have been overshare. But I hope that this episode, this little podcast talk that we had, encourages you to open up your Bible and take a look and read that book, because there's so much more. That's just a quick rundown, quick overview, a little conversation of what the book of Job is. And there's so much more to get into. You know, maybe in the future, who knows? Maybe this podcast will turn into more of a deep dive kind of a thing. You never know. Who knows what God has in store for us? But we are just doing the best we can with what we can. And I thank you for joining this podcast and me. And I hope to see you next time on the Convert Me podcast.
Have a great day. Aloha.